welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Nazia Iqbal, and here's a look at the stories for the day. Indian-American business executive Ajay Banga has been nominated by the US President Joe Biden to lead the World Bank. With the US by his side, his appointment is nothing but a formality. 63-year-old Banga's nomination comes at a time when the World Bank is embarking on a series of major reforms to better respond to climate change and to challenges being faced by developing countries. So, what are the challenges awaiting Banga at the World Bank? Bhashwar Kumar brings you the answer.
Ajay Singh Banga, better known as Ajay Banga, was born in Pune in 1959. After studying economics at Delhi's St. Stephen's College, he completed his MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He started his career in 1981 with Nestle and went on to work with PepsiCo. Banga is now a US citizen. In 2010, Banga took on the role of President and Chief Executive Officer of MasterCard. He spent 12 years at the helm of the payments and technology company, where he led work on digital economy inclusion, climate and gender. 63-year-old Banga is now the Vice Chair of General Atlantic, a US private equity firm that has invested over $800 million in solar power, EV charging, and sustainable farming. On February 23rd, US President Joe Biden nominated Ajay Banga to become President of the World Bank. The announcement comes after David Malpass resigned from the post recently. In his statement, Biden said, Ajay is uniquely equipped to lead the World Bank at this critical moment in history. Biden highlighted Banga's experience in bringing together public and private resources to tackle urgent challenges such as climate change. The US president also said that since Banga grew up in India, he had a unique perspective on how the World Bank could deliver on its goals of reducing poverty and expanding prosperity. An international financial institution, the World Bank's purpose is to provide financing, advice, and research to developing countries to aid their economic advancement. The World Bank Group has 189 member countries and consists of 5 institutions. At present, the World Bank's total financial assistance amounts to about $46 billion. So, what direction is Banga likely to steer the World Bank in?
I think we have to give him flexibility. We have to hear his view rather than impose views. But my own feeling is that one of the top priorities at the moment facing the whole world and indeed the developing world is how do you get enough finance into the restructuring that is needed to get us ready to combat climate change. And I think, in my view, the World Bank has to play a very large role, along with other institutions. So let's see if he can do that.
Right now, there are many other challenges the world is facing, including climate change, disaster risk reduction, and what is happening in the financial markets. I think he'll have to support that. And some of these things are actually in line with what he's been doing, and he'll bring a lot of value there. It's a great news not only for India, but actually it's a greater news for the World Bank. World Bank needed some credibility in last 75 years. They always had white male as presidents. Only Jim Kim, who was an Asian person, but he was born and raised in the US. Mr. Banga is raised and studied in India. So in that sense, he will bring that developing country perspective which the World Bank presidents always lacked.
It is felt in many quarters that the World Bank needs to evolve to better address climate change, future pandemics, and global conflict and fragility. Against this backdrop, what are the challenges that Banga is likely to face as World Bank president?
I think one of the big challenges he faces is that there is a weakening of support for multilateral institutions globally. And I think if the World Bank and within it the IFC has to play a much larger role, it's going to be a different role from traditional because in the management of climate change, certainly some of the financing will be directly from the bank to member countries or sovereign entities. But a lot of the financing will actually have to be to private entities because most countries envisage a climate management strategy with a big role for the private sector. And the risk perception for international investment in this area is very high. So the key question to my mind is, can the World Bank structure its activities in a way that risk perception of lending into climate change is significantly reduced? Because then if he can do that, he would leverage, he would use whatever the World Bank provides, which has to be a big expansion over what it has provided traditionally, but he would leverage with that a lot of private sector money. And that's a very big challenge in my view.
World Bank is a very complex, large organization. He'll face many challenges. First, he'll have to uh, assure everyone that World Bank is still relevant. As you know, the World Bank has two types of clients. One are very poor and fragile, and others are middle-income country. In poor and fragile countries, it seems that World Bank money and support has not worked. And in middle income countries, these countries don't need World Bank money, but more their knowledge. So establishing the relevance of the World Bank will be his first challenge. Second challenge will be to have a focus. Right now, there is a mission creep in the World Bank. They're doing too many things and spreading their resources too thin. Seeing what they can do best and where they can add most value will be the second challenge. And third challenge will be getting the resources for the World Bank. Over last few years, because of pandemic and others, the resources have got depleted, and I think getting more resources for the World Bank will be his third challenge.
The World Bank is no longer the most important source of dollar finance for projects in developing countries. Even as he works to shore up the bank's credibility against this backdrop, Banga will also be expected to foster international financial cooperation to address the numerous and unpredictable tensions prevailing across the globe today, and that could prove to be the most significant challenge he will face.
It's not just the Bretton Woods institution, the list of global corporations being helmed by Indian origin CEOs has never been so extensive. Microsoft, Adobe, Alphabet, IBM, Novartis, and Barclays are some of the behemoths which are being run by people whose roots can be traced back to India. So, what explains the rise of Indian origin executives in global businesses? This copiously retweeted image of Geeta Gopinath and Nirmala Sitharaman from a key G20 event in Bengaluru on Thursday is more than a picture-perfect moment. The two sari-clad women also reflect India's growing clout at the world stage. India has assumed the presidency of G20 and Sitharaman is leading the country in the G20's finance minister meeting. Gopinath, on the other hand, is the first deputy managing director of the International Monetary Fund. While Bretton Woods institutions are keen on onboarding Indian origin people at key positions, major global corporations too are increasingly appointing them at the top. Ajay Banga's nomination to the World Bank was closely followed by the news that former Deloitte Global CEO Puneet Ranjan will be the next chairman of SAP, a Germany-based European multinational software company. This is only a few days after Neil Mohan became the fourth CEO of the content streaming platform YouTube. A bevy of global Indians has rapidly risen to prominent positions in not just tech majors but also in global financial institutions, big banks, and global political leadership in the past half decade. We have Arvind Krishna, who served as the CEO of IBM since 2020. Vivek Shankaran, the president and CEO of grocery store chain firm Albertsons since 2019. Revati Advaiti of Flex Group and more. Not only this, nearly 200 people of Indian origin occupy various positions of political leadership across 15 countries, with Rishi Sunak and Kamala Harris being the prime examples. So what makes Indians a top choice for the top jobs in the world?
It's a process. These are the people who came to United States as students, completed their higher education, got employed into the key pivotal roles in the big tech and in high finance in other sectors, and they were behind many major innovations. Over the time, the board of directors and the big employers have noticed that how reliable, trustworthy, and the prudence of mind, the stability of mind is very high in the people of Indian origin. The Indians have also been recognized and noticed to do their own startup, own effort, own initiative, and many of them have got acquired over time by the big tech. Another factor that has been playing into the big corporates' mind that persons of Indian origin will foster the growth in Indian market and the allied emerging market.
However, experts also point towards a deeper cultural and political subtext.
I think Indians are being finally recognized, but is India as a country being sufficiently respected? I think this is a carry-on of an old colonial hang-up. This is the time of the G20 where India is taking the lead. The global north, the G7, has less than 10% of the world's population. The rest of us are 90%. Why is it we want adulation by that 10%? How many Indians would we respect because they got, respect from a university in Thailand or in Indonesia or succeeded in some social ventures in these countries? It's only when someone in the US says that we have done well, we say, see, thank you, we finally arrived.
Experts believe that while it is important to celebrate the global success of individuals of Indian origin, it will also be prudent to keep an eye on how India's growth and economic stature are perceived in the global arena. As India begins its G20 presidency, experts believe it is time to use its growing global clout to emerge as the voice of the global South. The growing number of Indian faces in global corporations attests to the country's growth story. India is indeed a shining star in the global economy. But it seems FIIs are not impressed. They have been dumping the Indian stocks for the last 2 months. What's making them nervous? And will the trend reverse? The next report takes a deep dive into how FIIs are viewing India as an investment destination.
Foreign institutional investors or FIIs have been cautious on Indian equities. In the last 3 months, that is from December till February 17th, they have sold Indian stocks worth over 29,000 crore rupees. In the past 1 year, since February 2022, FIIs have dumped Indian shares worth over 1 trillion rupees, exchange data shows. In contrast, the domestic institutions or the DIIs have pumped in over 66,000 crore rupees in the equity segment in the last 3 months and nearly 3 trillion rupees in the last 1 year. In this backdrop, the Sensex and the Nifty have seen a muted return in the past 3 months. So, what's worrying the foreign investors and where is India placed on their investment radar? According to analysts, the nervousness is more on account of policy actions of global central banks amid sticky inflation. Back home, the Reserve Bank of India too has been in a rate hiking mode in order to tame inflation. Christopher Wood of Jefferies says reopening of China post-COVID has seen foreign money chase their equities within the Asian region. According to Wood, flows to Indian equity markets are at a risk as investors increase their fund allocation to China. India, however, remains the best long-term equity story in Asian and emerging market context. Let's go to Aniruddha Sarkar of Quest Investment Advisors to get a better understanding of how the flows may pan out going ahead.
India has been a star outperformer among all emerging markets for most part of the last 24 to 36 months, in spite of massive FI outflows which we have seen over the last 12 months. We saw the FI selling continuing in January of this year also, but post-budget, definitely there has been some buying which has come back into the Indian markets from the FIs. But broadly, if you look at the trend, I think there is the reallocation of FI money between the various emerging markets. India, as we speak, is the most expensive emerging market and trades almost at a 60 to 65% premium to the MSCI emerging market basket. If you ask me the reasons for this, there are the two reasons to this. Firstly, India has outperformed all other emerging markets, and on the other hand, most of these markets have seen a massive price correction over the last 24 to 36 months. The markets where we are seeing some amount of the money flowing back is definitely the Southeast Asia. We have China and Taiwan seeing some allocation, and Brazil has also been seeing some amount of the FI flows going back.
So, does it mean that FII's love for India is over? Sarkar, like Wood of Jefferies, does not think so.
India continues to be a top allocation for global investors as its economic strength and resilience, strong demand growth drivers, strong financial system and banking system is unmatched among all the other emerging markets. With signs of US inflation remaining strong and US Fed rates further tightening but close to peaking out, we could see some more of FI flows coming back to India. But if you ask me, definitely there are some concerns on their minds as we speak. This year is going to be a very key election year with state elections in 8 to 9 states. This is definitely going to be a very, very volatile year, and that is going to keep the FIs at bay. Also, the whole Adani episode has surely put a dent on the sentiments, and questions have been raised which needs more answers to get the confidence back among the global investors. Also, with reports of a weak monsoon in 2023, we could see some sentimental impact on the negative side. And nevertheless, in spite of all these factors, India remains a must-have allocation in books of all global investors, and we are seeing direct allocation towards India increasing instead of the usual ETF route, which used to happen mostly earlier.
While the road ahead for equities remains choppy, as indicated by Sarkar, FII money will still find its way to Indian shores. This week, the markets will take cues from global developments. India's GDP data for the October-December 2022 period to be released on Tuesday will be watched.
Staying with the theme of financial markets, SEBI has given its go-ahead to the NSE to set up a social stock exchange as a separate segment. But what will this new exchange do? Which firms will be listed on it? Find out in our Decoded segment.
It is time to take our capital markets closer to the masses and meet various social welfare objectives related to inclusive growth and financial inclusion. I propose to initiate steps towards creating an electronic fundraising platform, a social stock exchange, under the regulatory ambit of Securities and Exchange Board of India, the SEBI, for listing social enterprises and voluntary organizations.
Proposed in the Union Budget of 2019-20 by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, the Social Stock Exchange will soon become a reality now. The Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI, has now given its final approval to the National Stock Exchange, or NSE, to launch the exchange. The idea was to enable entities involved in social services like charitable trusts and non-profit organizations to use the financial markets to raise funds. So the Social Stock Exchange, or SSE, will provide that the right platform. Just like the normal stock exchange, social enterprises can list themselves in the SSE and raise funds from donors. The stocks in SSE are exchanged for zero coupon, zero principal or ZCZP securities. So the donors will receive a ZCZP security for the donation that they have made. ZCZPs are like bonds, but the issuer of ZCZP doesn't have to pay interest or the principal to the donator. The ZCZP cannot be traded but can be transferred for other purposes like transfer to legal heirs. Both the for-profit and the non-profit organizations can get listed in the social stock exchange, but 67% of the activities of the organization should be directed to the development of the underprivileged and marginalized sections of the society who are behind in the development indexes of state and central governments. These activities could be targeted to eradicate poverty, malnutrition, gender inequality, and to provide education and healthcare. Investors in the social stock exchange can avail tax deduction up to 100%. Currently, only the donations to the government-run organizations get the full tax deduction, and that will change when SSE comes into picture. Both institutional and non-institutional investors can donate money in SSE, and retail investors are only allowed to invest in for-profit organizations. According to NSE, foreign investors are not allowed to invest through the social stock exchange. Currently, the UK, Canada, South Africa, Singapore, Brazil, and a few other countries have already established social stock exchanges.
I'm backed by the nation's trusted bank, SBI, the banker to every Indian.
There have always been concerns around the way donations were used by non-profit or for-profit social organizations. Social Stocks Exchange may address that concern as organizations listed on it will need to do regular audits of social impact, and these details will be made public. Well, that's all for today. For more news and analysis, please log on to business-standard.com. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.